This Satsang with Maitreya was recorded at the Big Pyramid in Pune, India in January 2000.
You're letting the natural process of your mind be. What you describe is just something that's happening within the framework of your mind. So you're letting that natural process be and watching it. But watching doesn't mean that you are inert. It doesn't mean that you're lethargic. It doesn't mean that action or activity doesn't happen. It simply means that you allow the natural flow of life, including the workings of your mind and their attempts to fix things, to occur in a context of passive awareness. So things keep happening.
Including me getting pen and paper and doing techniques and processes to clear my mind?
Yes, including everything that happens. Life is multidimensional and complex and sophisticated. Passive awareness doesn't interfere with the natural flow of life. It lets it be as it is, consciously, including everything. It has no judgment. It has no attempt to alter the natural flow. It simply is conscious of the natural flow. So that includes everything you can think of and everything that you do. Any attempt to alter the natural flow comes from the ego. So watching that attempt, and it will come, consciously, is the means by which the ego dissolves. Everyone has an ego, and every ego is programmed to achieve, to get better, to improve, to become enlightened. And your ego will make every attempt it can to help you with your growth. If all of that happens in the context of passive awareness, it's fine, it's the natural flow. Without that passive awareness, identification happens with the ego's program for self-improvement. That creates another, more subtle spiritual ego behind. This understanding recognizes that the ego is the fact of life, lets it do its thing consciously.
There's no repression.
There's no repression, and there's no more subtle spiritual ego created, because with passive awareness, no new subtle spiritual ego comes from behind, which is the difficulty when you do things directly without the context of passive awareness. Passive awareness is simply the context that life happens in. That includes everything. All of your ego efforts have to be there until they've gone. You don't try and change them. You simply witness them consciously, without creating a new subtle ego from behind, which is the limitation of many teachings. Most teachings have an embedded should that creates another subtle ego that comes from behind. So you're working with one apparent ego problem, but who is working with it? Again, a more subtle aspect of the ego is working with the obvious one. Passive awareness derails that process. It neutralizes the spiritual ego from coming in behind again. You simply witness whatever happens, including all of the games of the ego, especially all of the games of the ego. Then whatever happens, happens. Your mind is programmed to think, to achieve, to get it right. You watch all of that without judgment, passively. You do what you have to do, what you feel like doing, in the context of passive awareness. It's simply the context that life happens in. That's all. It doesn't interfere with life, just watches. And that's the foundation of meditation. This is the essence of Shiva and the essence of Buddha, the essence of Osho. It's the essence of all great masters who understand that awareness is the core reality of existence. So by resting in awareness, you're coming home automatically without the ego trying to be somehow different than it is. Just things are happening and you're aware of them. This awareness is your bridge to your deeper, higher reality. It's your connection to who you really are. You really are that awareness. But just resting there for a few hours every day is enough. And of course, life goes on.
So you go on doing everything you want to do just with awareness?
Yes. And then you don't make awareness another should, because unconsciousness is part of your nature also. When you become unconscious, there's no need to feel that you have failed, because it's natural. Everyone will become unconscious. Rather, celebrate when you remember again. When you come back to remembering, to awareness again, it's a moment of celebration. Unconsciousness is also natural. When you're aware of unconsciousness, it's no longer unconscious. So there will be moments when awareness is lost and remembered, and the remembering is a great celebration. And 1,000 times a day you'll forget and remember. It's all natural, it's all good. Yeah.
You said that if I am the witness in the watcher, but what if this my ego and my thought?
What's the difference between the watcher and the ego?
No, I mean, you said it just now. We are, who am I? Is we are the...
Awareness.
Yes.
Yes.
If I am the awareness, what is my ego and my mind? What is this?
Awareness is your ultimate reality. It is the highest aspect of existence and non-existence. Awareness is the ultimate. So ultimately, that's who you are. However, life is multidimensional. There are 7 layers to life and existence and non-existence. The ultimate layer is called the 7th body. Its nature is of pure awareness. It is of such indescribable realm that it's called non-being. It's Buddha's nirvana, extinction of the flame, no-thingness. Nothing much can be said about that because it will not fit into any concept. The next layer of who you are is silent awareness that can be talked about. It is the witness. The next layer of who you are is the 5th body. It is the being or self. And this is the first stage of enlightenment. It's your destiny to enter into the 5th body when the time is right. Your soul comprises of the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd bodies of existence. They're your emotional body, your astral and creative body, and the psychic and mental or meditation and love body, the 4th body. And you have a physical body. All of that is who you are. You are all of those 7 bodies or realms of existence and non-existence. So ultimately, you're that pure awareness of the void, and in the meantime, you appear to be, what you can recognize from your observation is that you have a body, you have feelings, you have a mind, and you have a private inner psychic world, and you have the awareness of all of that. You know how you feel. The feeling happens, and you can be aware of the feeling. Thoughts are happening, you can be aware of the thought. That awareness of what's happening is your bridge to the higher aspect of who you really are, which is the awareness of the void. So the whole game of spiritual growth and evolution is really a reunion or a reconnection with that which you really are, the awareness of the void. The method for that reconnection is simply sitting silently, doing nothing, consciously. And that creates the bridge to that awareness that you really are. And simultaneously, you're this body, these feelings, these thoughts. So you don't deny the lower levels of reality. That's unsophisticated and unhelpful. And it's a problem that some spiritual teachings have. They say you are that, and they deny this. You are this very body and the ultimate beyond simultaneously. So discovering all of this experientially for yourself is the whole process of growth. The spiritual talk is mainly to give you the thirst for the exploration, so that you become an inner scientist and you set out to verify with your own experience, is this true, what this Buddha is saying? And then you're not just a blind believer of the Buddha, you're an inner scientist, an explorer of your own inner world, and you find the truth for yourself. But yes, you're everything.
So I understand that I am everything, like multi-dimensional, right? But the enlightenment people, they say they have no mind and no feeling. So you're missing the third part and second part?
No, I have feelings, but the feelings have all become purified. I don't have negative feelings. I have feelings of love and compassion, of beauty and kindness and caring. My negative feelings of hatred and anger, violence and jealousy have all gone. So I have feelings, but they're positive. I don't have mind in the sense of it being something that happens unconsciously in the way that thoughts happen unconsciously in unenlightened people. But I have a brain, and the brain registers thoughts. Thoughts enter the brain when thoughts are needed. The brain registers a thought. So I'm alive, and I have a soul. The soul has been purified and neutralized, so all of its negative programs have been transcended. But it's still there. It has to be there for me to live. And I have a brain, but I don't need to use it to speak. For example, as I'm speaking now, there's no mental process going on. I'm not thinking about what's to be said in any way whatsoever. It's simply, the input simply enter the brain, comes through the brain, through the medium of consciousness. Consciousness is all there is. We are all a play of consciousness. This multidimensional existence that we just talked about is all a play of consciousness. The chair, you, me, the space in between us, it's all consciousness in different degrees of refinement. So thoughts enter my brain and yours from consciousness. Consciousness is intrinsically intelligent. The basic fundamental reality of the seventh body is conscious intelligence. That's who you really are. And that conscious intelligence designs and creates the whole existence. So it's very easy for that intelligence to simply put the thoughts in my brain which produce these words. So there's no mind needed for this talking to happen. It's all a spontaneous play of consciousness through this brain, nervous system and body. So I'm a channel, an opening for that consciousness to speak to you, really. It has to use a body to speak. So it uses this system to speak to you. This is all a message from consciousness.
Amazing.
It is really amazing, yes.
So is everything that all enlightened people say a message?
Not only enlightened people, but unenlightened people also. Because consciousness is all there is. So everything you think and do and say and feel is a play of consciousness. And there are no exceptions to that ever. The same is true for mass murderers. It's all a play of consciousness. There is no devil. It's all a play of consciousness. Good and evil both. Everything. Consciousness is all there is.
Why would consciousness want evil?
To make a good story. The whole purpose of this existence is a lila. It's a play of God, a play of consciousness. In order for the story to have depth and meaning, there has to be the struggle between good and evil. Suffering has to be there to create the context for the end of suffering. Evil is a necessary part of some aspects of civilization, some aspects of our History and culture require evil to be there so that they can eventually be transcended. It creates a good drama. In the end, good always wins.
How do you know all this?
It's direct input from consciousness. As I said, consciousness is using this body-brain nervous system to talk to you.
But other enlightened people say
All enlightened people say different things. Many will agree that consciousness is all there is. That is the core spiritual understanding. All enlightened people have a common experience. Their common experience is the oneness of consciousness. That is the quintessential enlightened experience. Advaita understands by extension of logic that therefore consciousness must be all there is. Since that oneness of enlightened experience is consciousness, then it stands to reason that the whole reality must be of consciousness. It's an extension in logic from enlightened experience. All Buddhas will agree that conscious oneness is their reality, and most would agree that consciousness is all there is. It's not an unusual idea. It's the essence of spiritual understanding. Therefore, everything that happens must be a play of consciousness. What else could it be? The logic is simple. And it's my direct experience. I know this experientially as well.
you know that everything's benign, everything's good and well.
Yes. Because that's what enlightenment is. It's a kind of completion. It gives human beings the proof that there is freedom from suffering. It gives humans the proof that there is a state beyond suffering, a state of love, of bliss, of divine consciousness, where everything is good, where everything is whole and beautiful. So I live in that state, so I have proof that, and I pass through much suffering. So I know from experience now that life is balanced, it is good, it is fair, it is just. And that's the message of all Buddhas. And all Buddhas say that it's your destiny also. Eventually, when the time is right, when everything has happened as it must happen, your own enlightenment happens. Your own freedom from suffering has to come. And then you understand the fairness of existence. Before that, you may not agree. Life appears to be unfair to many people. And that's one of the main values of Buddhas. They let you know, eventually it is fair, it is good.
So things aren't random.
Not at all. Everything is a creation of conscious intelligence. There's an infinite amount of planning and goes into the details of existence. Everything is a work of divine creation, of divine consciousness. Everything is perfectly planned to the smallest detail. Nothing is random. If things were random, then anything could happen. It would be a chaos, not a cosmos. And it appears that anything can happen. But that's from our human perspective. From a cosmic perspective, everything goes exactly according to the divine plan. Exactly. Of course, humans don't know what it is, so we are always living in wonder at the revelation of the divine plan as it happens moment to moment. And that's what the beauty of life is, living life as a mystery, understanding that it is perfect somehow, and being open to the revelation of that perfection moment to moment as it happens in you.
So we can't go wrong, we can't miss.
You can't go wrong, you can't miss. Your destiny is to be a Buddha. Eventually. It's only a question of when. And the time is already decided also. So you can relax. Your enlightenment happens in its season, like everything else.
grasp, because as a long-time sannyasi of Osho, I'm conditioned to this idea that I have to take responsibility for my own enlightenment. But my experience of taking that responsibility, especially since Osho left his body, is really frustration and despair, and so what shall I do next? So I hear you say, it's all set, it will come in its own season, and still I feel I've got to work at it. If I don't work at it, I'm not doing my job, or I'm letting someone down. It's just that.
The question, the fundamental question is, who is this I that is not doing its job? If you look deeply, you'll find that this I is the ego, and that responsibility is in fact an ego trip. A positive ego trip. It has its value certainly for the practical functioning of society. Responsibility and accountability are essential. They make things work. For the first stage of spiritual growth, that is transcending the tendency to be a victim of life, of blaming your parents and life for your problems, taking responsibility for your own feelings, for your inner world, is the foundation for mature spirituality. But it's only the foundation. It is an ego trip, a positive ego trip, a necessary one. It has to be there to bring the ego to its full fruition of creative development, but ultimately useless for the real spiritual work of dissolving the ego. Dissolving the ego doesn't happen by taking responsibility. It happens by let go and surrender, by allowing and trusting the flow of life to take you where it wants to go. You didn't create your own life. Life was created by some mysterious force. That mysterious force that created your life and sustains your life in the middle of the night when you're asleep, that force sustains your heartbeat and your breath. All of your systems are working, functioning perfectly in deep sleep without your ego. So that force that gives and sustains life also gives and sustains enlightenment and the entire cosmos. Only your program for ego separation feels it has to take responsibility. And that program is the mechanism for suffering and separation. So your experience is that taking responsibility more and more in your spiritual world is having the effect of creating more frustration, in fact more suffering. Because you'll never get it right. You'll never be able to manage the unmanageable. The spiritual work is unmanageable. It happens through a mysterious alchemy of consciousness doing the transformation, consciousness doing. When your ego is doing, you're limited to the framework of the ego's capacity, which is relatively small. It cannot fix its own problem. The problem is the ego, so the solution cannot come through the ego. It can only come through letting the ego go. So that understanding gives the foundation for mature spirituality, which is passive awareness of whatever happens. Life is happening without your ego when you're asleep, or when you don't think. There's no ego. Those moments of silence, there's no ego. Everything you described only happens with thought. When you're not thinking, there's no ego, and life goes on. In sleep and without thought, life goes on. So you don't need an ego for life. The facts are clear. And you don't need an ego to get enlightened. In fact, of course, it is the barrier. So the solution can only be from letting go of the ego, and that happens through surrender. But if you are taught that surrender is the door, and it is the door, and you try to surrender, then again the ego is involved in trying to surrender. So a more subtle surrendered ego, now I have surrendered, enters into the scenario. You can get stuck there. So a more efficient method is to simply be passively aware of whatever happens. That passive awareness doesn't create a new subtle spiritual ego behind. It simply watches whatever happens consciously. It allows the flow of life to move you, meditate in you, be creative in you as it wants to, and simply recognizes consciously that flow of life happening. Then there's no new spiritual ego is created. Then rapid growth happens, and then you understand that you are not really responsible for your own enlightenment. How could you be? You didn't create the mess. How can you create the solution? You didn't create the entire existence. You didn't create your own life. How can you be responsible for great cosmic matters like freedom from suffering? It's impossible. It's irrational. No human has that capacity. It only comes through divine grace from consciousness. So surrendering your ego to consciousness is the way. Not I should surrender, but it happens automatically as a byproduct of passive awareness. Surrender is the door, but not directly, indirectly through passive awareness. And now where is your difficulty with responsibility? Certainly conditioning is there, and everyone is conditioned for responsibility. But just let it be in that context. It's needed for practical social matters and for the first stage of growth, and that's enough. For the second stage, only let go, surrender, and conscious witnessing of whatever happens helps. That's why meditation is the foundation for all rapid spiritual growth. Because without meditation, that passive awareness doesn't develop into an active force. It becomes active not by you doing the action, but mysteriously it activates processes of alchemy and transformation. Mysteriously. All you have to do is sit silently and open to it, and then the awareness does whatever needs to be done without your involvement at all. It just happens. So where is the responsibility then? You can only then at the most say, well, I have to be responsible for passive awareness. But you don't, because you can't manage that. It's not within the framework of the ego to control awareness. It comes and goes. Every meditator knows that. All you can do is to sit silently and do nothing. In this context of sitting silently doing nothing, the spring comes, the grass grows by itself. So where is the responsibility? And you'll only sit silently if you feel to. Even if you decide from your ego, I'm going to meditate 8 hours every day for the next year or until I get enlightened, 3 weeks later you're just as likely to be watching TV. So ego resolutions don't necessarily bear fruit. In fact, they almost always backfire. And that's what taking responsibility means.
My experience with those ego resolutions is that I pretty much don't make any of them these days, and that gives me the feeling that I'm just drifting, but I have a sort of residual feeling of something, an itch that I haven't quite scratched, because I'm allowing myself to just, it looks like I ought to be making those efforts to move in this direction or that direction.
The facts are that you're coming to satsang twice every day and sitting silently in this energy field for 4 hours every day, plus whatever else you do. That is enough. I guarantee that is enough. And if that's happening without an ego resolution, if it's just happening as part of the flow of life, that's even better. In fact, even your ego resolutions are, of course, part of the flow of life. And the flow of life is what actually happens. It may coincide with your ego resolutions, or it may not. The resolution is one thing, it relates to the future. What actually happens is the flow of life. So you can trust what actually happens to be perfect for you. How can things be different than they are now? This is Buddha's great insight of tathata, of suchness. Things are like this now, and cannot be different. So that means all of your past had to be as it was, and could not be different. Equally, all of your future must be as it will be, and cannot be different. This is the law of tathata. So where is the ego in suchness? Things are like this. Just the old conditioning from the ego mind wants to do something, get it right, make an effort, achieve. It's just an old conditioning, and it's natural. Let it be there. Witness it passively. And more enter into tune with the deep flow of life. moment to moment, as it's revealed beyond mind. Without thinking, how can any of this responsibility and ego arise? If you tune in moment to the flow of suchness, the flow of life, where is the need for ego to live? The flow of life just takes you. It's bringing you here. You're sitting silently in this energy 4 hours a day. Growth is happening, good. There is no problem. Except the mind will have some comments about it. But that's not a real problem, it's just an old mental pattern. And the fact that you're here indicates that you have some spiritual interest. Otherwise, why would you be here?
Just to say goodbye.
Well, I would call it sayonara, not goodbye. Au revoir, we'll meet again. It's not goodbye, it's a temporary goodbye. Everything happens in its season. Everything happens in its season. There is no escape from your destiny. Your destiny is to be a Buddha. You can't escape from that destiny. It is impossible. Life may be taking you on some other detour now, but it's only a detour on your journey. In fact, it is the journey. The detour is in fact the journey. It's not really a detour. It has to happen. From my perspective, wherever you go and whatever you do will be absolutely perfect for your needs of evolution and growth. If it appears to be unspiritual, that means that whatever experiences you are pulled into are absolutely essential for your growth. Everything that happens is needed for your growth, including all the worldly and other experiences that happen. So from my point of view, nothing is wrong at all. You're simply going into other experiences that need to happen. When the time is right, you'll be pulled back into a more intensive spiritual growth. It's only a question of timing. It will happen, I guarantee. 100% guarantee.
Could it also be that next life?
I can't say when. The timing is not in my hands, it's in the hands of consciousness. What I can let you know is that it will happen, definitely, 100%. It may be next moment, it may be next life, we don't know. But it will happen, guaranteed, 100%. You and every soul is destined to become a Buddha. There is no escape. And the journey is long. The journey takes up to 10,000 years of evolution. Each soul has 108 lives. By life 108, you're fully enlightened. The first stage of enlightenment can happen anywhere from around life 104 or 105. It's the average. So it's only a question of timing. When you get to your destined time, it happens. In between, you have to have all of the other worldly and spiritual experiences necessary to complete your story. And your story is very multidimensional, very complex. Every seeker gets lost for some period of time, somewhere. It's perfectly okay. It's only temporary. Go and do whatever you feel like doing with this understanding, and be total in whatever life takes you into. It's all good. It's all divine.
So where was the need for me to come into the mainstream of Osho?
The need for everything that happens in your life and everyone's life is the divine needs of the story. Your life is a story of God. Have a look at your life from outside for a moment. Imagine that you are going to create a soul. Imagine that you have the power to create a soul. And that soul is going to evolve in consciousness over 8 to 10,000 years, over 108 lives. Now, in order to make that story interesting, complex, sophisticated, multidimensional, what kind of twists and turns would you write into the evolution of that soul? Of course, if you were a good writer, if you were a good storyteller, and consciousness is the ultimate storyteller, you would make the story as dynamic as possible. You would make it as interesting as possible. There would be all kinds of almost made it and then failed, got lost, and then again came another resurrection unexpectedly. Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you make it a good story? Consciousness makes it a very good story. So suffering, getting lost, difficulties, diversions, they're all essential to the story having depth. And depth is everything. Nothing is wrong. And it sometimes happens that people become almost enlightened just on the last moment when the ego is about to permanently dissolve. Something happens. And people, even on the last moment, fall prey to massive ego power trips just on the last moment. People can even become black just on the last moment. Anything is possible. And it does happen. Rarely, but it does happen. So enjoy everything that happens as simply the ups and downs, the twists and turns in a good drama, the drama of your life. And it's there's no way for you to change anything because it's not in your power to change the story. You're a character in the story, not a creator of the story, as I am. I'm also powerless to change anything. I live in total surrender to whatever happens. That's what being a Buddha means. It means your own ego has totally gone. So I live the mystery of life as it's revealed, moment to moment, in total surrender. I never try to change anything, because I know I can't. I'm powerless to change anything. So are you. That's why passive awareness gives you the ticket to freedom. You simply witness the events of life as they happen. And that's your divine connection. So whatever you're doing in the world or in the marketplace or wherever, take that one thing with you, just the awareness of whatever is happening. And that's all the spiritual connection you need. Just the awareness of whatever happens. It's enough. And trust. Your story is divine. Your destiny is to be a Buddha.
It hurts to accept this kind of answer. I have heard it many times, and now again I hear it. It hurts.
Sometimes the truth hurts. This is the truth. Your acceptance or rejection are also a part of your story. This is the basic truth of how existence functions. It may hurt. What to do? Things are like this now. That's the fact of life, isn't it? This truth hurts. Or this information hurts. You don't know if it's the truth. I do. You don't know. Just say this information hurts. That's the fact of life in this moment. That's all. Just the awareness of this hurt in this moment is all that's needed. Nothing more. No rejection of the hurt. No trying to change the hurt. Just the passive awareness that things are like this now. Hurt is there, and there is awareness of the hurt. The awareness is your door to freedom. Take that awareness of the hurt and everything else with you. Yes.
One thing I'm curious about that. You said that you are channeling from the soul. It means you know the future. And
No.
the future scenario?
I don't know the future, no. If I knew the future, then my life wouldn't be a mystery. If I knew what I was going to say next moment, it would be like a movie I'd already seen, so it wouldn't be interesting. No, I don't know the future. Fortunately. Otherwise my life wouldn't be worth living. It would be a hell. No, it's a mystery.
Do you get hints? Some sort?
Yes. But they never happen. Predictions are made and they almost never happen. Life is what actually happens. Yes, there are hints, but life is what actually happens. So I don't give any juice to the future at all because I know it's open. And I know consciousness loves to surprise us. So even when we think the future is fixed, we have a certain plan. I know very well that that plan is only, how shall we say, a possibility. A good possibility, maybe. Anything can and does happen. No, I don't want to know the future. I love the mystery.
How can you then say that the end is time for Buddhahood?
Because it's happened to me, and it's happened to thousands of Buddhas before, and they all say the same thing. And if it happens to one human, it would be very unfair if it didn't happen to all. Life is fair and just. I know that. Because it's happened to me, it has to happen to you. It has to happen. Evolution hasn't happened in you yet. You're a relatively new seeker. You're living in unconsciousness, in dreams. Nothing is wrong, it's just a matter of timing. With time, evolution and consciousness grow. So everything is perfect for how it's supposed to be now. This is your life. This is how things are for you. And the frustration and suffering that goes with that can be the fire, the fuel that brings you to meditation, to growth, to transformation. Meditate. Things will change in their time.
It can sound a little cold, this view of the world that God created a story and we have to suffer on our own.
Well, you're not on your own because you are not. God or consciousness is all there is. So you and all 6 billion souls of us are God or consciousness. So it's not cold. Consciousness is you and is suffering intimately with you. God or consciousness is your most intimate inner feeling. It is you. You are it. There is no distinction or separation. You are God or consciousness. So the intimacy and the connection are intrinsic to the setup. It's not at all cold. God has to suffer with you and find the ultimate reunion with you as well. God is both the transcendental awareness and creator of the story, and you and all 6 billion souls, and the rocks and trees and the whole existence. So God feels everything as you and me, and the identification with the individuals, and as the creator and witness of it all simultaneously. It's not at all cold. It's very involved. It can't be more involved. You are God. God is you. It's as close as you can get.
All the channels which are coming down, like Sarora, Cryo, and Lamata, they say this new age is bringing something up, and you're saying that want to be mind-body aware or enlightened is a predestined factor. You mean to say there is no evolutionary change in that game?
There may be. If you read the book, The New Dawn, you'll see that there is a central prediction that there will be a shift from darkness to light, from the Kali Yuga to the Sat Yuga, from violence to peace. The prediction is the central theme for that book. It is a transition that the book says occurs every 4,000 years. It says that we're entering that time of transition imminently, very soon. So yes, I agree with these other channels. There is an evolutionary shift about to happen. However, about to happen is still pie in the sky. It hasn't happened. So my work with you and with people in satsang cannot be resting on the future when some great change happens, because your mind will just be delaying and avoiding this moment and clinging to some dream of a future utopia. So the work in satsang doesn't rely or even emphasize that great change in any way. Yes, it may well happen, but the reality of the moment is things are like this now. You have your limitations and your suffering. My work is the alchemy of transformation of your limitations and your suffering here and now. So that's what the focus of satsang is. The thrust of the book is different. The book is really a message from consciousness, and it outlines in great detail this evolutionary shift that is about to occur. So the work of satsang and the work of the book are not quite the same. The book gives the big cosmic picture and outlines many things that can and will occur. Satsang is very much focused here now on individual transformation. So that doesn't entertain much speculation about the future, because the mind can project endlessly into future utopias and avoid your present reality. So for satsang, I hardly mention it. But if you're interested, you can read the book. It's there in great detail.
What happens in satsang with you that doesn't happen if I'm just generally aware all day, or maybe sitting alone with myself?
Sitting silently in the presence of a living Buddha is a potent method of deep cleaning all of your systems. Negativity is drawn out of all of your systems, your second, third, and fourth bodies, and purified in a much faster way than happens by the natural process of meditation alone. It's the same process, it's just speeded up tremendously. So the main value of sitting with a Buddha is that things happen fast. And they give you the recognition that freedom is also possible for you. Since it has happened, they communicate energetically to you that life is possible without an ego. Life goes on miraculously and wonderfully after the death of the ego. Ego dies and life goes on. So that gives you the courage to face your own ego death. Ego death is not the same as physical death. It's a different thing. Many people have them mixed up. The fear of dying and the fear of ego death become one thing. They're very different things, actually. Ego is just the controlling factor in life. The fear of physical death is something else. Buddhas are alive. Their egos have died. So this is communicated to you energetically in subtle ways all of the time. It gives you the courage and the capacity to live more and more without ego also. But more importantly, it drinks your negativity and transforms it into positive energy. The Buddha machine actively, somehow, miraculously does that work. How it happens is a mystery. So those two factors make rapid growth much more likely in this atmosphere than alone. Much more likely.
What happens as you talk?
Less. It happens most in silent awareness. With talking, my energy is in the fifth body. It's the energy of love and connectedness. With love and connectedness, you can feel good, but rapid growth doesn't happen so much with the sweeter love energy. It happens more with the higher awareness energy, which is only in silence and comes with the sixth body of the silent witness. So that's why the main purpose of these meetings is sitting silently in that higher energy of awareness. Then growth happens fast.
You say that the book is work of consciousness, and you have also reached the highest state of consciousness. That the traditions also are message from consciousness.
Yes.
But traditions go wrong.
Yes.
By logic, it means that either the consciousness is imperfect, or you have not reached yet, or traditions are not coming from that level of realization.
You're revealing the limitations of logic. You haven't understood the full implications of logic. There are other alternatives. There is another logical alternative, which is of course stated in the book. What it states is that consciousness loves to surprise humans. Therefore, when a great change happens, it will take us by surprise. So that's stated very clearly in the book. And it says, take all predictions with a bucket of salt. They may or may not happen. So there is a higher logic to that, which I think is clear from what I've just said. The main thing is that consciousness loves to surprise us. So seeds are being planted that something will happen, and the exact moment of that happening will be a surprise to us. It will be a surprise to me also. Consciousness loves surprises. So it is logical.
We can give wrong messages.
Of course, it's giving consciousness is giving messages to you and to all prophets and psychics, and there are thousands of people channeling and predicting all kinds of things. Most of it simply doesn't happen. So of course consciousness gives wrong messages. Obviously, the facts are clear. It's all a play of consciousness. Only about the message in this book will happen. It is destined to happen. The shift from the Kali Yuga to the Sat Yuga is going to happen. The only question is when. That will be the surprise, the exact moment. Everything else in there is absolutely true and correct. Everything. The book is a work of great intelligence. It is a divine message from consciousness that lays the foundations for unity, for spiritual unity. It is the way of the Sat Yuga. Unity is the way of the future. It has to happen. It will happen. And that book lays the foundations for unity. The only question is when. And that will be the surprise. Everything in there is true and correct and accurate. Only that one mystery is there. When will it happen? And that has to be there as a surprise.
Are there any other forms of manifestation you envisage except being a Buddha, like the choice I don't want to take right now? What are the other manifestations, like Bill Gates?
Whatever happens, just look at the world and all of the people. Everything is a manifestation of consciousness. Whatever is happening now, it's all perfect as it is.
So you mean to say Bill Gates, who has reached now $25 billion worth of being, is also a part of the manifestation?
Of course.
Minus Buddha.
Everything is a play of consciousness. Everything is made of consciousness. You and Bill Gates and the chair you're sitting on are all made of consciousness. A Buddha is a human being who has passed through the whole evolution of suffering and transcended all of the limitations of being human and has found his real nature of freedom, love, awareness, peace, beauty. That happens in the fullness of time. But a Buddha is no more divine than you are, or the chair. The chair is divine, a Buddha is divine, Bill Gates is divine. Everything is divine because everything is created by consciousness. A Buddha is one who has transcended all of the human limitations and understands and recognizes and lives all of that. That happening comes in its right time. But essentially, we are one. You, me, Bill Gates, the chair, the trees, the entire existence are one through the medium of consciousness. It's all a play of consciousness. It's all a manifestation of consciousness. It's all perfect in that sense. Okay, let's sit silently now and experience directly silent, passive awareness of whatever happens. Silent meditation really is just allowing the body to relax and being aware of whatever happens. If you feel like using the breath as an anchor, as a connection to this moment, then just be aware of the natural flow of the breath. There's no need to change it in any way. Be particularly aware of the gap between the breath. As you breathe out and before you breathe in, there's a small gap. Be particularly aware of this gap. And then simply watch with awareness everything that happens in your system. And sit silently like this for at least 2 hours every day. If you can find an egoless friend, a living Buddha to sit with, it accelerates and intensifies the process tremendously. If you can't, sit silently alone or with a group of friends. Silence is the answer.